Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I have another fabulous guest with me today. We have Savannah Freemyer, who is also a fellow VITA sex, love, and relationship coach. And we're diving into more Tantra here. What is it? What does it do? How does it change our lives? What does it mean? What does it look like? What brought us to it? You name it. This is where we're going. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here, Savannah.
Thank you for having me. And I love talking about all things Tantra.
Yay. Yay, yay, yay. This is so much part of our sex, love, and relationship certification that we both share. And then I've continued myself to specialize some more specifics in relationship extra and Tantra extra and female sexuality, trauma awareness, which I know you've done as well. Tell us a little bit more about you. What do you do with your sex, love, relationship certification?
My favorite part of the certification is still applying it to my own life. Like I
Mm.
still do the pleasure practices. I still dive in with the journal prompts and just living it, being that embodiment. I work with men, women, and couples like within my professional scope, but I think the most important part is that transmission of how am I living this? So I'm so grateful that we have all of the recordings and the book lists and all of the practices that I can just pick from. So that's
Yes.
the most important thing.
Living this embodied life is so important. It is part of how it becomes us so that we can take this into our lives and yeah, have our people, whatever those people may be, wherever our clients are, feel the transmission from there and then take it from there. And not only just the people who are our clients, like my children receive the transmission, my partner receives the transmission, my friends receive the transmission, people at the grocery store, right? Like random people. I have a trailer about an hour and a half away from here, and people will be like, "What is it you do anyway?" Like they don't even know, but they just know there's something that they want, right? And I get that a lot. Do you get that a lot too?
Yes, or if people find out what I do, it's like I give them a permission slip as soon as I tell them I'm a sex, love, and relationship coach to just pour out. And it's just so beautiful. Like I don't have to pull it. It's just it bubbles up to the surface.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that people are so thirsty to talk about this. And I don't know that they know where to start exactly, but having someone that's like, yeah, I breathe this. Let's let's talk about it. Like all of you is welcome. Like that's the transmission that I feel that I give off is that like nothing that you say to me is going to phase me. In fact, like it's probably going to turn me on. So like I want
Yes.
to hear it.
Yes. 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 Yeah. There's such a permission slip given by, I think, almost all of us sex, love, and relationship coaches when we studied. And by the way, if people are listening, like, what is a sex, love, and relationship certification? This is one through Layla Martin, who used to be SLRC, Sex, Love, and Relationship Coaches, and is now listed under VITA, which stands for a whole other long term that I'm not going to try and say because I'll butcher it, I'm sure. But it is about integrated tantric sexuality and bringing it into our sex, our love, and our relationships. And the certification itself, like she advertises and says, is about 650 hours. I added it up. It's over 1,000. It's like, it's a master's. It's like major. And that was the 1,000 hours in the first year only. This is also something I've continued to practice, to do more majors, to take deep dives into, to continue reading, to continue studying, to continue deepening in trauma awareness and all of these different faucets that, and I've also trained with Ma Ananda Sarita as well in Bali, who's also one of Layla's teachers. So like there's so much more vastness to this. At this point, I'm probably like, I don't know, 3,000 plus hours into deep diving. Plus, and then there's my own everyday life living it. So I just wanted to share that for those who are listening. And I know Savannah as well. She put something on her form here that I absolutely love. We're going to dive into all things of how you got into Tantra, but specifically like how you used Tantra and existential kink, which is another fabulous way of playing with our shadows to, hold yourself during your cart process. Like, holy Hannah, like, yes, this is what people need to hear of how we can use these tools and practices to hold us through tough shit. Because let's face it, we can live these beautiful lives, but there's tough shit happening out there in our lives. And we need to, be able to hold it. This is what co-regulation and groundedness and able, having our tools to turn to release the charge, the triggers, and to come back to our core self does. So let's show how that works in your life, please. Let's maybe start with a little bit more of how you got into Tantra and see where that leads us into.
Um, I mean, as far as like the sexuality and the holistic healing piece, I would say I started very young, like adolescence, that deep curiosity. And I remember getting some of my first sex tip books. I read Cosmo and I was like, it doesn't feel deep enough. It almost felt like manipulative. So reading some of these other books and learning about breath. And then I was very fortunate to have a boyfriend when I was in my late, like high school, like so upper teens, who was very sex positive, and he would bring home things. He worked at a sex shop actually, so that was perfect. But he'd bring
Extra
like
cool.
oils yeah, and I didn't know that I was doing or what it was called. Like I didn't know that it was tantric sex in nature, but we would go slow. We would like breathe together. We would do some of these like really intentional, like present awareness, just practices. So that was like my first taste without knowing what it was and what I was doing. I started teaching yoga when I was 18. So getting into that practice of like the mindfulness and how important the breath is and getting that body awareness. So those were my entry points. But as far as like the deep dive, like going straight off the diving board into Tantra I was in Aubrey Marcus's Fit for Service mastermind. And it just kept coming up. My story kept coming up around this deep sexual shame that I had growing up that was still like higher than the shame was the curiosity for sex. So the
Mm.
shame didn't completely like kill my curiosity or my drive for this. And I got to the point where I just felt so confident in talking about sexuality. Like I was kind of the go-to person in the mastermind group. Like that was just what people knew me as, was like the sex chick. And I went to do an well, even during COVID, I was introduced to Layla's practices. So like breast massage, full body orgasm, like ecstatic dance, celebrations, like just a glimpse into who she was. And that helped me get through the COVID lockdown. I think it would have driven me
Mm.
insane if I hadn't had those like rich pleasure practices. And I did an ayahuasca journey. And I've been in the holistic healing field for almost a decade. And I did some life coaching, like as a life coach, but I had never come out to say that I wanted to be a sex coach because I'm also a massage therapist. So there's still like so many ethics that we were like just
Sticky
driven into us at
areas.
school. Yeah. And
Yep.
I felt ashamed still, like shame that I'm the sexual person. And I didn't want people to think that like if they came in and got a massage from me, that they were going to get something extra. So I
Mm.
hid that part away, but I did this Aya journey, and I came out after the first night. And when we shared in our circle the next morning, I just said out loud, I'm like, I want to be a sex coach. Like, I want to show this part of myself. This is a subject that I will read cover to cover books like within a week, like just devour them, devour podcasts. Like, I'm like, I'm ready. I'm ready to admit this to myself. And literally, as soon as I got back, I checked my email and it said that Layla's program applications were open. And I didn't think
Mm.
twice. I sat outside by my pool in my little magenta bikini and just like typed on my phone the answers
Mm.
and just wrote in there just so much rawness. Like I think one of the questions was, how do you know that you want to do this? And I'm like, well, my pussy is a full fuck yes. So the fact that I could write that in an application, and I got accepted, and without thought on like payment, I was like, fuck yes, let's go. Like I'm ready. So I just feel like I got like whatever ego, whatever like protector moved out of the way, and my core being that just knew this is like the path for me. Like led me. My pussy
Mm.
led me, really.
Yes, body always leads us if we will slow down enough to listen, because the whispers can be a little quiet in the beginning. Mine were, I know that, right? But there's this calling, there's this yearning for more. And yeah, more, please, more, all of
Yeah.
it. And we've talked before, if you've listened to some of the earlier podcasts, because we've been doing this theme around what is Tantra and how does it bring a different flavor to every single one of us. And I want to talk a little bit going into, you know, Tantra is not all sex. It's only about 8 to 10% of sexuality is this part of sexuality is this part of Tantra. So let's dive into how you also use Tantra and existential kink, with his, again, playing with a little bit of shadow work. And I'm sure you'll explain a little bit of that here. I've also studied with her as well. And how you use that in your life and specific, maybe many places, but specifically you shared here during your current process. That's interesting because that is where the power really lies, how we can bring these philosophies and principles and way of being. And that is a key word, being, especially for the feminine. It's important that we're being and not doing. How to be through such a hard, sticky, uncomfortable process, which I will second. I'm in the middle of it right now.
Oh, maybe I can throw some tips your way.
Always play with all of these pleasure tips, all of them, all of them. But yeah, how did you use that?
So a little backstory on why I was in court. So I was engaged and we had a child together, and I actually did the whole VITA program, pregnant and with a newborn. And
Wow.
my ex-fiance cheated on me
Mm.
with sex workers, gave me STIs, which thank God were
Oh,
curable. But it was devastating. I mean, they're just the amount of betrayal and just it was a huge blow like to my self-esteem too, because I'm like, I'm a sex coach. Like, I love having sex with you. Like, what am I not enough? Like, just so, oh God, it
mm.
just like so much. And here I was, you know, completely attached to this infant. Like, so she was 7 months
Yeah.
old when I found out.
You're
And I took
vulnerable.
Yeah, gosh, like I wasn't able to work. We didn't have childcare. I worked only like a couple days, could maybe with one or two clients like a day. So I mean, financially, I'm like, how the fuck am I going to do this? So I ended up fleeing. It took me 2.5 months. Like I just went deep into it and used pleasure practices and used the worthiness and deservingness and the sexually thriving aspects within the VITA program. But that's the whole other story. But as far as court goes, like this is where it gets like kinky and exciting. So we weren't married, thank goodness, but we had a child together and we had to determine um, like the co-parenting schedule and the financial aspect of it. And he's not an easy person to deal with. So, and then there were a couple other elements that came into the court process that made it really complicated. And I just felt like there was so much of my life just out on display. Like we had to do family
Mm.
assessments where strangers asked me really tough questions where, and with like trauma, like having to tell your story in a chronological order is re-traumatizing. So doing
Yes.
that, getting picked apart, having my financial documents, like I had to provide everything and knowing that he could see all of it and I've, had never had to really get in front of a judge before, and just that whole process and working with attorneys and making sure that, I was staying out of trouble and making sure that everything was smooth. Like there was just so much while also healing from abuse, like the trauma of abuse, and also raising two children and trying to get my business back up. And now here I have this apartment that I have to pay for and just so many
It's
things.
a
So
lot.
instead of
Yeah.
letting court bury me, I brought in existential kink and some of like these tantric practices and sex magic. So as far as the existential kink process goes, you bring to mind something that you don't like. Like obviously I did not like going and seeing him on a screen. Thank God I didn't have to be in person with him. with a judge and an attorney that spoke for me, that sometimes I'm like, no, that's not what I wanted communicated, but I have to stay quiet. So I brought up, especially like with the financial part, like, here's this person that completely like shattered me and wanted control over me, that is going to see some of my most intimate parts. Like, I mean, finances are incredibly intimate, like sex and
Mhm.
finances, like people just don't put that out there because it's very private.
Been shamed
So
and pushed down and buried for
yeah,
many, many years. Very
yes.
linked.
So I brought both of them together, and
Well,
I would
brag.
do this existential kink around my one of my kinks is exhibitionism. Like,
Mm.
I love being seen. I love being watched while I have sex. Like, I like stripping, and I've never been a stripper, but like stripping for a partner. I'll keep the windows open while I'm naked. Like, I love it. So I brought that same energy in of like, oh, he's looking at my credit card statements right now. Like, do you like that? Like, I'm getting turned on,
Mhm.
like thinking about it right now. Like looking into all of my bank statements of, yeah, like, do you wanna see where I went to lunch that day? Or do you wanna are you imagining, like, who I might have been with or who I wore that Victoria's Secret purchase for? Like, just
Mm.
bringing all of those elements in, and I would do sex magic before our court dates around, like, my desired outcome. One being the getting my daughter into the preschool that I wanted her to go into, because we had a
Yeah.
lot of disagreements like with that. And I would visualize walking her in, the decorations outside, like how she would do when I would pick her up, like bringing all of those senses in and bringing that self-pleasure element into it and just believing that it was
Believing.
possible. I mean, I
Let's break
you
that
still have
down
to
for a
take,
minute.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You still have to take action. Let's break that down for a moment for people who are listening. They're like, okay, what is existential kink and sex magic? I'll break down sex magic because I play with it a lot and teach it a lot. So, sex magic is us activating our sexual energy, not specifically for sex, but activating our sexual energy for creation, for manifestation, for feeling and being. And so, what we're doing in the feeling is we're bringing in all of our five senses. So, we're bringing in, what do we see? We're bringing in, what do we taste? What do we touch? What do we smell? What do we feel? Either touching or actually feeling in emotions in our body. And we're starting with our desire. And then we're moving and creating and building sexual energy. And then moving it by using breath, sound, and movement. And energy, actually, focus as well, intention. And bringing it through each of our chakras, through our entire system from root to crown. And then we're actually releasing our desires out into the universe and visualizing and five sensing this entire thing that we want to call in, like you just said, the daycare, how you're going to walk her in, what you're going to feel, what you're going to touch, what you're going to smell. So it doesn't have to be for a sexual reason, but you're using this to create, to feel, which does a few things. It allows one, your body to feel safe to having it. If there's any blocks in there around deservingness or worthiness, they come up in there as well. And it allows you to, which then you can process if they come up, which is fine, right? We can bring the love and compassion and acceptance to whatever shows up. And it's allowing it to feel safe and real and allowing it to become your reality, essentially. It's a beautiful, beautiful practice that you can practice solo or with a couple, like as a couple, or in a group. I've done it in a group with, well, I was going to say 100 women, but no, I've done it with 1,000 women too. So there's many different ways that you can. Pardon me. Yeah, Layla came to one of our Mama Gina rooms in New York, and actually, she taught one of the first sex magics I ever did. And I was like, "Are we going there?" It was very, very early on in my journey. I was like, "Oh fuck, we're going there." Okay, so that was super fun and juicy, and that's sex magic. But I'd love, yeah, go ahead and describe a little bit more about what's existential kink.
Yeah, so Carolyn Elliott, I think she has a different last name now, but
Does
she
she?
wrote the
Okay,
book.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think it's Lovewell, Carolyn Lovewell.
Okay, I think my book's
So
up there
she,
somewhere.
yeah, so she wrote Existential Kink, and there's a meditation that goes along with it. And I mean, I practiced that meditation probably 100 times, like after I left my ex. And she has you imagine that you are this limitless being. that, you know, you're omnipotent, omniscient, like you can transform into whatever you want, and you have this deep sense of bliss. You've never known stress. And let's say after like eons of that, you get a little bit bored. Like you want to play a
Mm.
game with yourself. You want a little drama. I mean, look at us humans. Like we love drama. Like we love Game of Thrones and soap operas, and you know, we get off on watching politicians like argue with each other. Like we need to admit first that we love drama. So in this meditation, you go from this expansiveness to bringing up something in your human life that you don't like. And let's say that you consented to it, you know, like I consented to this long drawn out court process from like having a really stingy end to a relationship, like because it was something fun, because I wanted a little bit of theater in my life. And so when you consent to it, just like you would in the kink world, where if someone came up to you and like smacked you in the face and like humiliated you, you would feel violated. But if you
Jarred. Yeah.
consent to it, it's in the container and you're like, God, just be so nasty with me. Like there's this sense of turn on. So you bring that quality in of, okay, I consented to this experience. And then the part that feels is where you embody it, is you go into your body and feel all the sensations that this don't like situation brings up for you. Because a lot of times it's not the situation itself, it's how we feel about it that makes us
Hmm.
harm in our bodies. And instead of this being something underground, this is like what shadow work is, right? Where you shine a light on that. So you're shining a light on these sensations in your body that this event, this don't like situation is creating. And instead of turning them away or shutting them down, you open and embrace to the sensation. And so it frees up energy, and it just, the sensation and the event transform. And you get to decide, do I want to keep like feeling this way? Do I want to keep living this way? And I love what she says in the book about getting off on it, like getting
Hmm.
off on that sensation, because when you free up that energy, it creates this sexual charge, sexual turn on. And then you can decide that you want something different in your life. But she says, do not bypass that. Like don't get off on it. Like don't fake the orgasm just to get the good stuff. Like you have to admit first that you fucking love it. Like you love the intensity. Like that there's a part of you, not your ego part, that wants the good things. Like that's where we get stuck. Like I can't admit that I love being jealous, or I can't admit that I loved getting cheated on, or I can't admit that I love feeling like I'm in trouble every time I go to court. Uh,
Hmm.
but there's a deep part of you that wants to experience all of it. Like that's your divinity, your shadow self, like that
Yeah.
is so much greater than that ego part that society tells you, like this is what you're supposed to, how you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to like. And it, what it does for me in my life is it just liberates me,
Yeah.
where I don't feel bound and constricted by these things, where, and I don't allow that control anymore
You're not
of
the
like
victim
letting
anymore.
sensation. Right, exactly. I'm like, fuck yeah. Like there's parts of me that are like so satisfied. Like look at my life. Like I have so much satisfaction because I helped create this. Like I was a creator and the co-creator of this drama. And just like when you watch Game of Thrones and you're like, oh my God, like did that really just happen? And you keep watching, it gets to be that way like in your life. And so my court, instead of this being something that was put upon me, it was this kinky, fun game that I felt alive.
So good. And I'm guessing you ebbed and flowed between also feeling stressed and contracted at parts and points, and then you just keep coming back to your body, keep coming back to your sensations,
Oh,
keep
yeah.
coming back to your truth, keep coming back to intuitive inner knowing from pussy, and compassion and love and connection from tantra, and then also from getting off on the shadow work, on the kinks, the parts that were really uncomfortable to hold, and still bringing love and compassion and acceptance and approval to all of that at once.
Yeah. Yeah, and beyond just the court part, because I mean, that was only every couple of months that I had to do something with that or prepare for it. It just was a long, drawn out thing. But I was a mess when I left. Like, I had complex PTSD symptoms, like from healing from that trauma. Yeah, just the stress of like, how am I going to make this work? Like, when I left, I had no real proof that I was going to make it past like a month, like
Yeah.
financially and just everything else. And I knew that the most important thing was my healing. Like, I knew that jumping straight into like trying to grow my business would have like cracked if I didn't work on me. And so that's something else, like working through Tantra. I felt like, speaking of those constrictions, I couldn't breathe right for like 4 to 6 months. Like, I couldn't sleep.
Shallow
I was
breathing, I'm guessing,
like
very short breathing.
very shallow. Like, I just felt like I just couldn't gasp a breath of air. And I was in and out of the hospital for panic attacks. Like, I thought I was having a heart attack. So
Yeah.
I mean, I went from a really dark, like, place where I just felt like the world was like caving in on me, and
Closing
I
in.
didn't know,
Yeah.
yeah, where to go.
Sleep,
But the
stress.
thing,
There's quite a dysregulation feeling that I can recognize because I did my training before leaving my marriage and then going into leaving. And it was like, oh, I'm shaky right now. Like I could feel the shaky. So I would keep turning to practices, keep turning to,
yes,
oh, there's so many practices. There's so much we can do to move it, to feel it, to allow it to be in our body, to play with the shadow, to play with our fear, to play with our joy, to play with all of it. There's so much to play with in there, which is amazing. And that's what we offer as coaches too, to our clients in various forms, whatever they're dealing with. Yeah.
yeah, and I tried a lot of different I mean, I really focused on my vagus nerve and
Mhm.
getting that regulated. But the thing that, and gosh, I'm so grateful for this program, because the thing that really made the biggest difference were my pleasure practices. Like, before I would go
Yes.
pick up my daughter from him, I would do a 30-minute pleasure practice, something with my yoni egg, a breath work practice, or just holistic sex tools, like bringing those in, and it would help me stay regulated. And like, that's
Yes.
where I would get out of those ruminating dark thoughts and into my body. Like, that was key. Like, that is, if I could teach women getting out of abusive relationships anything, it would be pleasure practices.
Yeah. And you can use this not only for getting out of an abusive relationship, you can use it before you go into a job interview. You can use it before you go into a date. You can use it before you want to show up and do a podcast or before you have a sales call. Like, so what you're doing is you're grounding deep into your body and you're grounding into your impenetrable spot where you know who the fuck you are and how good you are at what you do, and then you show up in that confident, I fucking got this manner because you do. It's just other life and stuff sitting on top that is, sitting there monkey minding you, telling you you're not good enough, or telling you you don't deserve it, or telling you maybe you shouldn't be asking for what you want. And all these different messages where they're not true. So it's like we clearing them away and we're dropping into body, dropping into impenetrable spot, dropping into turn on. And for women, that is our creative center. That is also our power center. That is our innate inner knowing. That is our, it's got everything. And that is our pelvic bowl. That is not only pussy, but pelvic bowl, womb, intuitive knowing, our witchiness, all of it. It's all there. So we can drop into that power. I'm just turning you on as I talk. As we can drop into that power and drop into that core center, we're locked. We're like locked and loaded. And we can do anything we want from this embodied, turned on, I got this no matter what, even if it doesn't go the way I want, even if the judge says no, even if you don't get the job, even if you like the guy, but he doesn't like you, if it's a date, whatever it may be, you're coming from this, I got this no matter what. That's what Tantra does for you.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say that is the heart of Tantra for me, is realizing like you have everything that you need like within you, and that all of it is sacred.
Yes.
And another thing I want to add, when you're listing off the ways that you can use it and bring this in, when I had my daughter, I gave birth at a birthing center. Like, I refused to go to a hospital.
Mm.
They wanted to do a C-section when they did an ultrasound at 28 weeks because my placenta was like on the lip of my cervix. And they're like, well, nope, can't give birth, live birth. You need to get a C-section. I'm like, well, fuck that. So
Make your
I did
move.
the five sense reality. I did some sex magic on having the birth that I wanted. And then within labor, I used the 5 holistic sex tools. So I was I was focused on my breathing. I'd set my intentions. I was moving my body. I was sounding like I liberated myself. I told people basically to give me space. Like, I asked for what I wanted. I knew myself like to be the queen. And I went in the bathroom in the dark, sat on the toilet, like I told everyone to go away, and I just trusted my body. And I sat on the toilet, and not even 5 minutes of sitting down, I breathed her out. Like, I
Mm.
didn't have to push. There was no forcing. I just opened and surrendered and allowed. And it was ecstatic and orgasmic. And I wish I could
Oh,
bottle that.
I
Like,
love that. I totally love that for you. And I get it because way back when, so my daughter, she's my youngest of three, that I had at 30, and I was not into Tantra at the time, but I'd read enough books and I'd read enough studies of home births and different things. And my second child was at home, but it was still scary because it was post C-section from my first. So my second was still a little scary. Can I do this? But my third, I put in my earphones. They weren't AirPods at the time, they were corded. And I got into the bath and I had midwives, but we were in the hospital. And I just kept telling them, shh, I can hear you over my music. I don't want to hear you. And I had Josh Groban going. And every time he would hit this peak of like his high, it's kind of like opera, right? Like high opera notes, I would have a contraction. And my body was like syncing up with this music where I was just breathing and surrendering. And his voice was literally carrying me through these contractions. I had her in 2.5 hours, and it was beautiful. It was the most beautiful, embodied, empowered. I get it. Like, leave me alone. I'm busy here. And I just kept trusting my body and going through it. So I would love to do it again because, like, hello, look at what I know now. That was 18, 19 years ago now, right? 2006 is a long time. But yes, we can do that. And we can bring all of this embodied somatic empowerment work into anything we want to do. Dating, court, giving birth, going for job interviews, raising kids, all of it.
yeah, building a business for sure.
All of
Need a
it.
lot of extra work for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is the beautiful work of Tantra and what, taking the tantric lens and applying it to sex, love, and relationships and bringing that into our lives. It's absolutely phenomenal. Hmm. Anything else coming up that feels alive that you'd like to share to our listeners today?
Yeah. So during that time after I left my ex, I took a year off of partner sex and just did these like, they were powerful. I did these pleasure practices, and I got really clear about what type of partner I wanted to call in while also still working through my own healing. And I am so grateful now that I have a partner who he was also looking for the same thing.
Mhm.
It's like, I love like our story of like how we met, but we teach couples yoga and couples connection classes like together. And what I love
Mm.
so much is, yeah, just that transmission of like our love for each other and the the deep work that we've done and the vulnerability that we've done with each other, like that transmission goes out. And I just think it's so beautiful to be surrounded by so much love in a room. And I just think even applying some of these practices, like obviously doing some work on yourself, like is still important, but doing like maybe 5 to 15 minutes a day of intentional connecting or just sitting and eye gazing with your partner, like would
Mhm.
transform so many relationships. So yeah, applying Tantra to relationships and co-parenting and building something together, it's so powerful.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I also have called in the most incredible man. Um, yeah, had that list, knew exactly what I wanted, and voila. And it was like, wow, okay, that was cool. More, please.
But of
And yeah,
course.
it's that's what happens when you literally get locked and loaded in pelvic bowl, in pussy, in who you are, in what you want, in what you're here to do, in who you are, all of it. It's just locked and loaded, and then it just ripples out. And then your life starts co-creating with you. It's so beautiful.
Yes.
So
Oh, this
beautiful.
whole podcast turned me on. So
Good. Perfect. 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 Please tell our listeners also what you have going on right now, where they can find you. We're going to put the links in the show notes too, but feel free to share it verbally too, please.
yeah, probably the best way to find me is through my social media channels. So Facebook, I changed that into a professional account. So I mean, you can follow me on there, Instagram. But as far as working with me, like I can work virtually, doing some one-on-one coaching or coaching with couples. But some of my favorite things to do are to help people be like sexually thriving in their lives and to help close the orgasm gap, like especially with
Mm.
heterosexual women. Like I believe that everyone needs to have access to that orgasmic power, that it's your pleasure is your power and it's healing. And if I can help women open that up and liberate and educate men, the men that love having sex with women, on how to help their women do that, like everyone's lives will improve.
Yes. I love that. I wrote down, might even be the title, we will see, but pleasure is power, and it absolutely is. Absolutely is.
Yes,
Yes. Just digesting all of that. So juicy. So juicy. Well, thank you so, so much for being here. I really appreciate you sharing your story and being so vulnerable and sharing how Tantra has really made a huge impact in your life. Because I think more and more of everyone, women, men, non-binary, couples, you name it, need to hear the power that comes with Tantra, the power that comes from pleasure, from really connecting to your body, to who you are, and creating the life you want from there. That's what we all deserve.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you
For
so
having
much
me on.
again. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. Till next time, everyone.